Hi, good morning, everyone. We are just switching over from our Midwest Manufacturing Leaders Networking to here. So if we're running a couple minutes late, we apologize. We had 40 people over on the Zoom breakout rooms and everything seems to be going just fine over there. So we're just going to give it a minute here for everybody to switch over from the breakout rooms into this webinar. And I see our panelists are joining us now. So we'll just give everybody a minute to switch over here and we'll get things kicked off.
Thanks, Tom.
Sure thing. And we are live, folks.
Behave ourselves.
I'm just glad I joined the right one.
Yeah, it was a little bit confusing.
I actually can't believe I actually did it. You know, I mean, it makes me feel better on a Friday.
Right.
Yeah, it took us about a couple of hours to go, okay, how can we do this where we don't confuse the heck out of everyone? So
Right.
You did a great job.
Well, thank you. All right, so I think we just need David to come over and Lauren. And they were both in breakout, so they should be here shortly. All right, for those of you who are just joining us, we are running just a couple minutes behind here. We're just breaking out from our breakout rooms where we did our virtual networking this morning with about 40 folks. And we got everybody kind of kicking over to the webinar series now. So in just a couple of minutes here, we'll join into this webinar conversation. And we're just waiting for a couple of panelists to kick over from the other side. Welcome for those of you who are joining. Got a bad echo there. For those of you
probably me.
Oh, no worries. For those of you who are just joining, we're just waiting for everybody to come over from the networking we were just doing. So we will get things going here in just a second. All right, and then we got Lauren. Welcome back, Lauren. Still see some people rolling in, so welcome to the December MML webinar. We are just waiting for everybody to move over from the networking breakouts into the main room here so that we can host our webinar. All right, great. And there's David.
All right. Talk about stressful. Thinking this is going to be a great presentation and I'm not involved.
No, you're good. All right, I see just a couple more people rolling in here, folks. We are live, running a couple minutes late for our webinar here, but we're just waiting for everybody to move over from our networking this morning into the actual webinar room here. So we'll get things kicked off here in 1 second. Okay, gang, 6 after. Why don't we go ahead and get things rolling? So we've got a couple people still rolling in, but we're going to go ahead and get things started. So welcome everyone to the MML December meeting. Thanks to those of you. We had, looks like probably about 90% of the group that was over in the networking session this morning. So hopefully that was beneficial in such a crazy time. And hopefully you got to meet a few new people and can take those conversations to the next step. So welcome everyone. Would have loved to have seen you in person, but obviously we want to keep things safe. I do encourage you to go out to the MML website, that's mmlgroup.org, and look at the upcoming events page. We do have our 2021 schedule. We're planning a January webinar, and then we tentatively have a room reserved at the lodge. We'll see how that goes for March. And if not, we'll turn that one into a webinar too, but we're trying to get 2021 moving forward as well. So please do take a look, mmlgroup.org. For those of you who were able to join the networking, we hope you got to meet some folks, new folks today. We're really excited to be here. And this is all made possible by our sponsors who are on screen today. They are all experts in their own field in their own right, as well as the people that support MML. So thank you to our MML sponsors for everything that you do and make this possible. That is Lapata Flegel, Mike Weiss, CMA Global with Jamie Wolf, Parkside Financial with David Kennedy, Black Twig with Tom Gaddy, Polsonelli with Paul Klug, Atomic Revenue with Lauren Fast, and I am Tom from Swift Systems. So we're going to just jump right into this. Please do use the chat for any questions that you have. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll wrap those questions into the conversation as we go along here. We're going to let the panelists tell you a little bit about themselves through the conversation today, just to get things rolling. So let's get things kicked off. So Jamie, what lessons have you learned from the pandemic that will carry into post-pandemic operations?
So I could probably take up the entire hour talking about this, so I will try to be brief. And as a little bit of background, our firm has been around about 45 years. Headquarters is in Clayton, but my two partners and I just took over ownership in January of 2020. So we had 8 weeks of bliss of business ownership, and then the world fell apart. So, one of my new favorite sayings is from Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And, while we certainly had some rainy day plans in place, it did not account for a worldwide pandemic, as you might guess. So what we did, as things started to shut down early March, we did what we tell our healthcare clients to do. You got to triage. We knew we had to stop the bleeding. And so for us, that meant taking care of our team first, employee safety, getting everybody home, and then quickly turning to survival of the business. And so from all that, I'd say there are, a few key things we learned. One, technology, learn how to use it before you need it. I think we finally got the team on board with that. Finance and regulatory, it was really helpful to us to have a strong relationship with our banker that allowed us to increase our line of credit, great relationship with our attorney and our accountant, which really helped us on the regulatory side. Hey, if we need to suspend rent, how can we do that? If we need to make layoffs, let's do that in the right way. What are some tax breaks we can get? The PPP loan. Clients and community, we then really quickly switched gears and said, how do we take care of our clients and how do we take care of our community? We were fortunate in that each of our consultants has close client relationships, already had touch bases regularly anyway. And so we just had the team divide and conquer, reach out, make sure your clients are doing okay, try and get a feel for how their business is doing, what projects are going to keep going, what might get cut. And then we said, hey, we're all psychologists. How do we help? So we put on a bunch of different free webinars on this, stress management, keeping your team together, keeping your culture alive, your own resilience. We put together a bunch of free executive roundtables for, local executives to come together and really talk about what each of them are doing, and a lot of idea sharing. We really learned we got to deliver our products and services in multiple formats. We were fortunate in that we work globally, so we had already done a fair amount of work via video and phone, but as you might imagine, our work is pretty high touch, and folks want a lot of confidentiality. So we had a ton of in-person work we had to transition over, and multiple revenue streams has really saved us. About half our business is what we call selection assessments. Clients say, hey, CMA, have our candidates take these psychological assessments so we can get to know them, make a good hiring decision. As you might imagine, that pretty much dropped off. So we were lucky that we had another half of a business that was still executive coaching and culture and organizations. That became very important. Hey, CMA, tell us how to work remotely with each other. And then, really the main last one, communication is key. I am sure you've all learned that along the way. We were lucky in that we already had a lot of processes in place. We have weekly team meetings. We have one-on-ones with all the supervisors. We told everybody to reach out to their buddies, the folks in the office they talked with over the water cooler. Make sure you have a couple phone calls or Zoom meetings set up in here so that we can be checking in on everyone every day. We use technology to have fun. Every day we had a challenge. that someone would put on, tell us about your work from home, send us the picture of your kids, send us, what you've decorated for Christmas. So we already had a lot of that culture in place, and we've just switched gears. We do quarantinis every Friday still. It's, come if you want. And we started adding town halls, and we're going to keep those. We learned we really had to communicate in multiple ways. I have a former partner who used to say, and unless you tell people what they want to hear, when they want to hear it, and in the way they want to hear it, they're going to tell you haven't communicated. So we just let folks know what we're thinking. Hey, team, this is a rough time. Here's what's going to happen over the next couple of months. Here are the points where we're going to know that we're doing okay or aren't doing okay, and we'll keep you updated. So we learned a lot. We're doing our own after action reviews about how we did, where'd we misstep, how'd this pandemic affect our business, what steps we need to take going forward to make sure that we're ready to go should anything happen in the future.
Awesome. Great stuff, Jamie. Thank you so much. David, same question to you. What lessons have you learned from the pandemic that'll carry over into post-pandemic?
Yeah, so a lot. The benefit is we had wonderful technology partners, and being a bank that is not very old, we have been leveraging technology since we opened. And so when it comes to foot traffic in the bank, we don't have a ton of foot traffic. Most of our customers use all remote deposit, cash scanners, et cetera. Majority here in St. Louis, but also some outside of Missouri. So we were able to kind of protect our bank lobby, which is kind of the main area, obviously, from foot traffic. And then from there, it really became, trying to protect our culture, as Jamie mentioned, and then reaching out to our, this is kind of why we hone so much on the management teams that we operate with from our client base. So this kind of was a little bit of a separator, but how could they adapt? For the most part, our client base, it for the last year, you couldn't really cost cut your way through 2020. There had to be some sort of adaptation, some sort of development, changing in plans. And so that kind of set a decent amount apart. And I'll touch on that in a few minutes here when it comes to kind of how we view credit in the future.
Great. Thank you. Good stuff, David. Thank you very much. Lauren, same question to you. What have you learned in the pandemic?
So Lauren Fast here from Atomic Revenue. And as a revenue operations company, we do a lot of wonderful things from the start and finish to how a business flows through all the lead generation, sales conversion, and customer advocacy. And my biggest focus for the answer to this question with what lessons we've learned is to really hone and practice, not just to profess, but to practice empathy. We work with a coast-to-coast team, and by nature of our organization, we've always been virtual, which has been extremely nice. Our transfer to this virtual world was an extremely fluid process. But from Washington State to Washington, D.C., everyone was experiencing versions of their next normal in such a unique way. And then within their households, amongst working spouses and working partners and children needing to attend school, the biggest key was to take a break, take a breath, and to truly practice empathetic practices with our employees and then also for clients. So at the breakneck speed with which I think we were familiar with working in, let's say 2019, leading up and gearing up for this phenomenal 2020 for all of us. I'm just assuming all of you were prepared to do that. We all know that when we did have to take that break, that was not only okay, but that was going to strengthen and make more resilient the business practices that we had in place and ensure that the foundations of the companies and organizations and then the people at the helm of those organizations would not be burnt out and would still be there to run them well as intended or as they flexibly adapt to what 2020 demands. So that's what 2020 will probably look like as we've learned those lessons. But for us and for me, it is empathy.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you very much. Great stuff. And then Mike Weiss, how about you? What lessons have you learned?
Well, I've learned how resilient and innovative and people can really be. I mean, this year is obviously who could have seen this coming. It's been like drinking from a fire hose. And I don't know that we've learned this, but certainly it's reinforced the importance of having good people and good systems in place and the value, the culture of the organization, having communication internally, externally, and frankly, just working as a team, caring about the people you work with, caring about the people that you work for, and trying to do the best you can under circumstances. And the reality is most people, everybody's going through this. So, there's a lot of people understand the issues coming from all sides. We've not gotten a lot of pushback from folks because we've had to change the way we've done things, either from our employees or from our clients. And all that's, I think, just a testament to the positivity of good relationships.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Mike. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much. Great stuff. Thank you, everyone. Okay, moving right along. What are you seeing as some of the top trends in 2021, given the events in 2020? Jamie, would you like to take that one for us?
Absolutely. I can certainly take it from the perspective of people and talent, and then any of our other panelists, I'd love to hear you jump in on your own fields. So we're seeing really 5 key trends. Part of it is a result of the pandemic, but part of it is also this social justice movement that's going on in our society right now. So the 5 things: remote and hybrid work, DE&I, so that stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. This whole increased digital transformation, we've really, everyone I think has seen a need for more technology. Focus on employee mental health. That's really become a hot topic. I'm sure you're seeing it all over the news. And then women's progress and need for support. I'm not sure how many of you have seen the different studies, but because of mainly the homeschooling component, women in the workplace have really been set back a number of years. It's been a majority of moms who have said, I need to step away from my job. I can't both homeschool and do the work that I'm doing. So, on the remote and hybrid work, some of the best practices there, communication and flexibility. A lot of organizations are moving towards allowing more flexibility in where the individual works. I know that's not always going to work on the shop floor, but you have an operations function that may not be needing to be in the office day to day. A lot of organizations are really saying, okay, how do we give you the opportunity to do that, but still create the socialization, the accountability? Diversity, equity, inclusion. You may have seen many large organizations now are designating someone for this role specifically and really allocating more resources to address inequality in their organizations. Digital transformation, a lot more training and support from what will be seen for employees moving forward in 2021. What are some of the different tools that we had maybe hoped to implement or thought might be a good idea? There'll be a lot more technology, and so that will mean your employees will need a lot more training around those things, as well as some boundaries, right? Cybersecurity is a big deal. What are the technology expectations that we have for our organization? The employee mental health component, a lot of organizations now are providing some type of virtual or telephone type employee assistance services to help reduce that mental health stigma, make sure that their employees have someone to talk to. And then this last one around women in the workplace, a lot of organizations we're seeing focusing on, how do we help our women in the workplace, our moms in the workplace, make sure that they can be successful here, have the work-life boundaries that they need? What are the policies, programs, and procedures that we have that might inhibit that and that we may need in order to put in place in 2021 in order to help that?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. Great stuff, Jamie. Well, switching gears here a little bit, folks. David, we're going to come back to you. We're going to talk a little bit about credit and then follow with PPP. So, David, how is credit being viewed post-pandemic?
Yeah, good question. I would say from our perspective, we, as I mentioned before, a bank that was started in April of 2008, which, as most everybody knows, sounds like an interesting time to start a bank right in the start of the greatest financial recession that's been in our lifetime. The good thing was we started essentially with no loans, therefore didn't have any bad loans. And so basically fast forwarding that to a clean balance sheet is kind of how we started. So you fast forward 13 years and we've got about a $650 million balance sheet after starting from zero about 13 years ago. which means we service manufacturing companies from about 1 million in revenue to 75 million in revenue is kind of our sweet spot. And we'd like to think that we entered this current pandemic really in a similar spot. So we have focused a lot on having a clean balance sheet so that when something like this happens, we've been preparing for the last 12 years, putting money away aside, obviously in our loan loss reserve, et cetera, basically planning during the good times to invest in the bad times. So during this, we've hired 9 people, and we're a 62-person shop. So 9 people, not hiring 9 people is a lot of investment on our part, knowing the wave of what's going to be coming in 2021, which we assume will be continued growth and continued opportunities. But really, it comes down to listening to our customers, being willing to listen to a story. So obviously, this is a pandemic that really affected everybody. And we sat down as a lending team in March and April and said, at the end of the day, we need to err on the side of our clients. And that means be available. This is a time that they need their bank. They need their bank to step up and say, here's what we've committed to, and here's how we can help and help through this. And so that also comes into knowing, having a relationship with our clients, as Jamie alluded towards earlier. And so the focus on management teams, I think, will continue to be a part of that, the depth of the management team and how they were able to adapt. We've seen a lot of success stories during this pandemic of how companies have adapted and changed. As I said before, it was not something you really could cost cut your way through of 2020. So I think that the combination of standard underwriting, at the end of the day, we're a bank, we want to get paid back, that's part of how making loans works. But then also the people underwriting will become even more important. Of what did you do during the pandemic? How did you navigate? How did you adapt? Will become an even bigger part of underwriting going forward. And some banks are going to be, perhaps too big to add that component. And it's really going to be, do you check these boxes? And then some also are going to have lenders, well, we had a relationship with this specific lender and he's or she is no longer there anymore. And so having to, start that from scratch. So that those 2 components is the people portion of it, and the management, and then this, in addition to the standard underwriting.
Awesome. Great stuff, David. Thank you very much. Mike, diving a little bit deeper down now into PPP, what is the taxability of PPP?
So I was hopeful that we would have some new COVID relief legislation to discuss relative to that topic. But as you probably all know, that hasn't happened. It's only been discussed for the past, I don't know how many months, but they just can't seem to drag it across the finish line. But as things currently stand in the current law, the covered expenses that have been paid for with PPP loan proceeds that have either been forgiven, where the loan's been forgiven, or is reasonably expected to be forgiven, are not tax deductible. So that effectively means that the forgiven PPP loan is taxable income to the business. That being said, that does not appear to have been the intention of Congress when this was set up. It's just been the interpretation by the SBA and by the IRS. Have seen some outlines, frameworks of the pending legislation, the one that's being discussed that they can't seem to finish. And that does seem to be a topic that will be resolved. In other words, that they do intend to make these expenses deductible for tax purposes and put that in the current legislation or the new legislation. Whether that'll happen or not, I guess, remains to be seen, and whether there are any changes to that, do not know. So it gives businesses reasons to think about it. Currently, maybe it might affect timing of how they file the tax returns and that sort of thing. Just need to talk to your tax advisor about that and plan accordingly, and then just keep your eye on the news.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the advice there. And then Mike, to continue that a little bit, what's the audit process the SBA will use for forgiveness, especially for loans over 2 million?
So that's also something that it's not completely clear in that there are no published audit processes by the SBA. And the reality is there haven't been that many loans submitted for forgiveness yet, or applications for forgiveness. Last thing I saw was somewhere in the 10 or 12% range. The reality was there were 5.2 million loans processed, totaling $525 billion. But of the 5.2 million loans, only 29,000 of them were over $2 million.
Oh, wow.
And so when you apply for forgiveness through your bank, and the bank then submits it to the SBA, and the SBA, both the bank and the SBA have the ability and it's in their purview to review and or audit the information that's been provided. But there hasn't been, again, there isn't a whole lot of experience out there. So most of the numbers on the forgiveness application are pretty objective. I mean, they're facts. It's how much did you spend, how many employees did you maintain, what other expenses did you incur? You need to keep information and the documentation for all that. But the one thing that's sort of subjective was the certification that was required in the application, where it stated that the borrower had to state that the current economic uncertainty makes this loan request necessary to support the ongoing operations of the applicant. That's a forward-looking statement, and that's also looking at what you're going through. Put yourself back to April and May and early June when all these loans were being processed, and how dark everything seemed and appeared. And people were really concerned. Now the reality is, looking back 8 months, and we can see it in our own client base, a lot of our clients have had the very best year they've ever had. They've had explosive growth and everything along those lines, and they applied for PPP loans. And there's a concern. So any loans under $2 million were sort of given a gimme on that, and that they're presumed to have complied with that economic uncertainty question. So it's really the loans over 2 million that are really going to be a serious question. And there were only 29,000 of those loans out of the 5.2 million. So my guess is that's where people are going to, where the focus is going to be. And the SBA has a form, it's form 3509, that will be provided to borrowers over $2 million by their banks upon when the application for forgiveness is submitted to the SBA. And it's really a loan necessity form that provides, that requires the borrower to submit answers, factual answers. How did their business do this year compared to last year? What kind of cash reserves did they have? Those sorts of things, which on a looking back basis may be a different picture than on a looking forward basis. So I'm not saying that it's going to be a real issue for folks, but it certainly could be an area of question. The American Institute of Certified Public Accountants has said, it's not a foregone certainty, or don't give up the ship here. So even if you had a great year and you got a PPP loan, doesn't mean that it's not going to be forgiven. But you need to have your ducks in a row and have the reasons why you thought it was necessary at the time to present. And if you had contemporaneous minutes, discussions, memos, what have you, when you took out the loan, that would certainly help you. But you have to just go through the process.
Great stuff, Mike. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Keeping along those same lines, Paul, what are you seeing as far as the audit process goes for forgiveness?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I think Mike really did a great job of covering all the hot buttons in the area. I would say that a few things that he mentioned. One was, a building block that we encourage clients, back in March and April to do was to document, as Mike said, the process of how they decided that they had this quote need for the PPP loan, and to whether it was working with outside consultants in their industries, what the projections for their industry might be from an outside perspective, looking at it internally. Because as Mike said, we also had clients who did well. They applied for loans, thinking they weren't going to do so well, and then June, July, and August were fine, or May, June, July. And so, that did cause some concern. Mike hit it on the head with the cutoff of the 2 million. Our guys, our folks in DC have said, anyone who borrowed or applied to the PPP loan program can be audited. Anybody can be audited. The question is, are they really going to focus on these that are over $2 million? There is this additional questionnaire that needs to be filled out. The questions on that questionnaire, although it was outdated when the notice came out about that questionnaire. I don't think I haven't seen any updated information about that questionnaire for those over $2 million. Some of the questions, when you read them, you'll say, I don't want to have to answer that one that way, but you might have to. Our folks in DC have said, that questionnaire also is just being used as an information gathering tool, so that, down the road they can, there was a lot of attack on the program early on. And so I think the SBA wants to have a lot of data and to be able to show, how they administered the program was done well. And so some of that's a little bit self-serving for the SBA on the one hand. On the other hand, I think the worst case scenario, if they find that you didn't have, the need for the money, is it's just not forgiven. No one's going to jail. No one's, perjurizing themselves or anything. The fact is they've come around on that a little bit to say, look, the worst case scenario is the loan's not forgiven. And again, I think we're a long way away from a bunch of companies, having their loans not forgiven because it was so subjective, as Mike said. So yeah, we kind of see some of those trends. We get inquiries from clients along those lines. But at this point, I think there were some strategies suggested early on that, hey, don't apply right away, because those will be the test case for the SBA, and they might be more onerous on their review. I mean, we've had clients that applied and have been forgiven 100%. And so, that might have been a good strategy. Some were also delaying the application for forgiveness, thinking that some of this legislation would be clarified on the deductibility of the expenses that were paid. And again, that's not going to become clear before year end. So, I think those strategies might work. And then there's just some lenders who, weren't ready for their clients to apply. But those lenders will pick up the pace. And part of our thought on it is to apply and get the ball rolling. And, it's hard to change the facts the way they existed back in March and April and May. So you might as well get it going and get the process moving if your lender's prepared to do that, and bring it to a head and try to find out where you stand.
Great stuff, Paul. Thank you very much. We've had a question come in from Michael Landau that I'll flip out here to the group on PPP. Michael asks, is there any forecast on the future stimulus package, and is there more PPP on the horizon? Mike, I know you touched a little bit on that. Do you have anything to add there?
So obviously nothing's cast in stone at this point. There's been a lot of discussion of a PPP2 program, and it'll be available to companies who have actually suffered an economic downturn. I've seen discussions of a percentage of revenue drop in a particular quarter of 30%. I've heard 25 to 35%. I think they've settled, or at least the framework I saw settled on 30% reduction in any quarter, second, third, fourth quarter, 20 over 19. It'd be available to companies with 300 employees or less. And I think the structure will be somewhat based similarly on the original PPP loan, and companies who took out loans under the first program who qualify for this would be able to take out second PPP loans if they're eligible for it. So it's not just if you've already done it, you're out of luck again. It would be available to businesses that would qualify. Now again, it's subject to change. It's nothing's, the legislation hasn't been passed, nothing's signed into law. So just stay tuned.
Okay, great, thanks. Would anyone else like to add anything to that question?
Yeah, Tom. So I would chime in just a little bit to say that I think Mike again is right on point as far as it. There's been discussion in the news. You might see some articles about it, but I can tell you from our group in DC that's sort of studying the legislation, I have not received any kind of alert or any update, indicating that that additional PPP loans are forthcoming.
Okay, great. I always love a conversation where we can get the lawyers and the accountants together, because we get all the truth from both sides of the story. So thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that. Well, moving right along here, marketing. Let's see, I'm going to go over to Tom Gaddy now. A question for you. What trends are you seeing now in email marketing going into 2021?
it'd help if I unmuted myself. I think the best campaign so far in 2020, really, I think that the thing that's changed is conversational friend-to-friend tone. I think brand heavy, gimmicky, in your face tactics. I mean, I think they're less attractive. I think walking back those really lengthy brand emails, lean into a simpler, more conversational approach. I mean, people do business with people. It's more relatable. There's tons of different people talking about different ways to attract business, but I think becoming more relatable, your customers appreciate, kind of a respite from, and this is coming from a sales guy, right? From pushy selling tactics. And I think that, we're not selling anymore. I think we're trying to figure out how do we help. I mean, and I think Jamie talked about, the psychological aspect of things. It's really a different approach. So I think if anything, whether it's B2B and it certainly doesn't cover everybody, but from a B2B manufacturing level, I think being more genuine, relatable, and really just kind of, thinking like you're talking directly to somebody out in the audience right now.
Okay, that's awesome, Tom. Thank you very much. We've got a somewhat related question coming in from Brian Jones. Thank you, Brian, for the question. Brian asks, are MBE companies, minority businesses, being promoted more or less these days? And has the pandemic had any effect on them? I'm curious, with the legal, accounting, marketing side, banking side, is there any input there, or Jamie from the people side?
So from the people side of things, I'm not sure if they're being promoted more, at least not, I haven't heard much on that. But in terms of effect, absolutely, because here's the main issue. MBE companies tend to be more in those industries that were effectively or more impacted by the pandemic. So things like the service industry, restaurants, retail, just personal services, housekeeping, haircuts, all that kind of stuff are more of our minority and women-owned businesses, and those got hit really hard. So yeah, they've definitely been affected.
All right, great. Would anyone else like to chime in on that answer? Okay, thank you. So let's see, moving right along here. Tom, I'm going to come back to you. Are you seeing an increase or decrease in open and click-through rates on the email that we were talking about earlier?
You would think that email rates are on a decline based on the fact that it is sort of the most popular way and marketing channel for several years. But actually, for the most part, it wasn't the case until 2019, really. But from 2015 to 2018, globally, it was about 24% open rates. In 2020, it dropped to about 21.5-ish, give or take. But I think that so I haven't really dropped. I think you just have to go back to what I said earlier, and that has become more relatable. Also, the other side of it is 80+% of emails are opened and read on mobile devices. So, it's critical to understand that people aren't going to read these long, lengthy, in-depth things. I mean, they're trying to get quick hits. Give me information that is going to be beneficial to me in a short spot. Sure, if you want to send me, send me a video that I can also look at, that's great. But I think overall, I think the increase has not really changed, or it's decreased a little bit, but I really don't see it changing. I think if people just do what they're supposed to be doing by communicating with their potential prospects, customers, and whatnot. I think there's so much more in depth. It's hard to talk about it in a short period of time in terms of what you should or shouldn't do, when you should send it, what time of the day, what day of the week, all of that stuff. But I have not really seen a big decrease in the open rates and actually click-throughs too.
Great, thank you. Good to know. I know I've seen a huge increase or uptick in email every day. There's a lot more marketing email coming out these days. So I think a lot of people are doing it. So that's good news. Lauren, I'm going to jump over to you on this one. This is interesting for our event today. How do you keep attendees engaged on online events?
Well, I think that we proved that very well during the networking breakout session. The ways that you keep attendees involved is to really offer inclusion. The chat feature of asking questions to the panelists is another way for them to initiate a conversation, but just to implement and improve the validity of the content that's being delivered and that it is receiving a response. So if the attendees are deriving genuine value from it, it should spark or initiate that next step thought. And many of those elements come from what it is that's being delivered and how questions might be posed to the actual group. So in a group of 50-ish, like we have had here today, it is a time management situation, but where you have specific vendors and manufacturers that are interested in these various topics to then invite them to ask questions. And then at the end, the connections that we have later. So when they recognize that there's value delivered from a variety of disciplines throughout the whole piece, then they know that at the very end, they have the opportunity to connect later. So to keep people engaged is truly to ask the stimulating, thought-provoking questions in a non-absolute language way. So not a yes or no question, but in a thought-provoking way of how might you consider this, or what are some things that you have done differently that other people might derive interest from. So it's the key to how you ask the question. And then, as I said earlier, allowing that chat feature to be available to them to let them know that their voice can be heard, their questions do matter, and that we hope we're delivering massive value to them, like all presenters hope they're delivering massive value, so that the benefit is it was time well spent and that they will return.
Awesome, great advice. Thank you. And Tom, over to you. Do you have any other suggestions on how to keep attendees engaged?
I think Lauren did a great job. I think the only, the other side of the coin is we're in the event that we have today, it's a panel group. But if you're going to do an online interactive kind of an event, I think if you've got a speaker, make sure they're passionate. There's nothing worse than getting into a webinar and the person you're listening to is on autopilot, and it's monotone. You're going to lose them big time. Also, I mean, and that's, I think we've got some really good speakers with MML. And I think that if we would convert that from live to today in the situation we're in now, I think we have some great presenters that would have done very well in this way. The other piece of it, and you've done a great job, Tom, is that I think you got to keep your technology up to date. You got to make sure it's working. Plan, practice. Don't wait to the last minute to figure out whether or not something's going to work. We've all been down that path, and all of a sudden everything crashes, and then you go, well, gee, that was exciting, right? And I think it goes without saying, obviously, you have to have compelling content. So what are you talking about? There's live Q&A. We talked about it as well. I love the networking. Tom, it worked out fantastic. I highly recommend it for everybody. It is a way to kind of just get people excited again and being out there. It's, we can get pretty, I mean, I'm sitting here drinking a cup of Starbucks, right? And by myself, but I feel like I'm actually connecting with people today. So that's a great thing. And you did a great job doing it. Now, if we get into engagement on a much larger scale, meaning conferences, things that are, and I just talked with somebody a couple days ago who, had a 2-day seminar. And I said, wow, did you guys have breakout sessions? And she said, well, they did have some breakout sessions, but they made sure that everybody kind of got up and moved around. I mean, they were doing physical stuff. It's like, hey, stand up, stretch, do some stupid things like mini workouts. They sent people swag so that they could have something in their hands. Like I said earlier, we did a bourbon tasting virtually, and I still have my yellow rose hand sanitizer. So, you know, it's always on my desk, and quite frankly, you need it. So I think that's one other thing. And then sort of the last thing, and not everybody likes this because you get called out, but I think when you're in a larger kind of a setting where it's really one-on-one, I'm sorry, not one-on-one, but more of an audience-driven type of an event, I think calling out attendees by name and saying, hey, you know, David Kennedy, you know, if David was sitting in the, sorry, David, not to pick on you here, but if David was in the audience and not a presenter, you know, you call on David, go, hey, David, it's good to see you. You know, hey, what do you think so far? And how do you feel about what's going on? And that could be in a room of, heck, it could be 100 people. So there's a lot of different things, but I think that the big thing is keeping the content really fresh, being excitable, having, you know, getting, you know, enlist a passionate talent, you know, to speak, I think is critical in keeping people engaged. So there, I'm going to shut up because otherwise I'm going to make everybody go to sleep.
Thank you, Tom. Good stuff. All right, we're going to switch gears here just a little bit over to some business transition topics. So, Paul, what should you expect if you're buying or selling a business or considering buying or selling a business where PPP has been involved?
Sure, Tom. So it's interesting. In 2021, you know, there's factors that are weighing heavily in favor of a robust M&A market, and then there's probably some factors that might pull back on that a little bit. And so I think, you know, a couple of the factors that are in favor are certainly low interest rates and a lot of money sitting on the sidelines with private equity. But to your question, some of the things that might be road bumps in the M&A process in 2021, one is certainly the PPP loan program, and whether your seller has taken out that loan, what's the status of the loan, has it been forgiven, how did they document it, how well is it documented, what's the diligence that a buyer is going to do to figure out, you know, what risks there are between buyer and seller on that loan. So yeah, it's definitely going to be on the list, the hit list, so to speak, of diligence. It's going to be on the hit list of potential valuation. It's going to be on the hit list of, do I have to have an escrow as part of this transaction? So I'm not saying it's going to be it's certainly not a death knell to a deal. If the seller has a PPP loan, yes, it can be worked out. Yes, there's ways around it. Yes, there's ways to put things in an agreement to address it, but it's certainly going to be on the hit list of things to keep an eye out for.
Great, thank you, Paul. David, along the same lines, should business owners be considering holding or selling their business coming into 2021?
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul obviously gave good color on that. When it comes to, from a bank perspective, obviously interest rates are low and banks have a decent amount of liquidity. I think it comes back to being able to hear a story and hear what's going on and how a company came through a pandemic. And so I think it also is looked favorably upon. Obviously, everybody experienced some headwinds when it came to that. But if you've got a business that only dropped by 10 or 15% and then is rebounding, those are going to be looked favorably upon when it comes to the sell side. So you are starting to see also in regards to the PPP question that Paul mentioned. We're starting to see. I know that Mike mentioned 10 to 12%. I think in some of the smaller banks' perspective, we've received 50% of our PPP loans forgiven or applied for, and 80% of those have all been forgiven already. So you're starting to see some churn, and we've seen from when we first started it, the SBA has become more responsive and picked up on how they're clarifying some issues and seeing things move through the process pretty quickly. So hopefully continue to see that.
Great. Good stuff, David. Thank you. And Paul, back to you. What are your thoughts on holding or selling coming into 2021?
Sure, Tom. Yeah, not to sound like a broken record with what David said, but I think it's going to, 2021 is, there's going to be deals done. I think 2020 deals probably year over year from 2019 were down as far as number of deals and the total deal value. But I think you're going to see that at least maintain what 2020 was, if not maybe go up a little bit in 2021. So I think it's there's plenty of favorable factors. I think the structuring of deals, potentially doing more earnouts based on, how the business is going to look, a year or two from now, given what it had to go through in 2020. I think you might see more of that. But again, I don't think that's going to be the death knell to any type of M&A work. I think it's just going to be things that are going to have to be addressed as part of the deal structure and the deal process.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great information, everyone. Switching gears a little bit, Jamie, I'm going to come back over to you. What are the thoughts on how manufacturers can upgrade their talent to take advantage of the current labor climate?
Yeah, great question. So I would just encourage everyone to take a page out of Churchill's playbook, never let a good crisis go to waste, right? So now that you've had to maybe make some tough calls, or there's a lot more folks on the market these days, how can you make your organization be a best place to work that these folks want to come to? Maybe they feel like they're working in an unstable business or they're out of work. Thinking about non-traditionally, what work in your business can be done from anywhere. And now we have the technology to be able to do that. If you haven't explored alternative workforces before, now might be the time to do that. Veterans, retirees, those who were formerly incarcerated, those can really be some good populations. And, on the shop floor specifically, and many of you are probably already doing this, but what are the technical colleges and schools that you should have a partnership with, or maybe deepen that relationship so that you've got a good pipeline of interns and apprenticeships? And then last, are you leveraging your online job postings as much as you possibly could be? Local Chamber of Commerce, your state and regional economic development groups. So here in St. Louis, the RBC, St. Louis Economic Development Partnership. Are you using social media as much as you can? I know there might be this bias out there that folks on the manufacturing floor aren't on social media. Well, they might not be on LinkedIn, but it's very likely that they're on Facebook, maybe even some of them on Instagram. So reach out through your great employees that you already have and find out what types of media and online resources they're using so that you can be using those to look for some of that talent.
Great. Thank you. Awesome stuff, Jamie. And you mentioned LinkedIn. So Tom and Lauren, I'm going to come back to you. How are people leveraging LinkedIn to network when face-to-face is not possible? Tom, would you like to go first?
Sure. I'm going to actually go back to just the HR thing again, just so I want to add something to it. I think that when you're focused on whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook, and I don't disagree with Jamie on the shop floor guys are not probably on the LinkedIn, but family members are, and friends of friends and people who have a need to help that individual get to that next level. So a lot of times I think that, it's a great source to learn about companies, because that person that's out on the shop floor day to day is probably not looking at a whole lot of stuff. They come home, they want to kick back and relax because they have been working, if they're working. And I think that they have the opportunity to somebody else to say, hey, by the way, did you ever hear of this company? They're hiring, very unique opportunity there. I think you ought to at least take a look at it, because I think that the family members of those people, and we've seen this in the past, from a client, that's an area of focus that we kind of help them with. As far as LinkedIn, I mean, it goes without saying, carve out some time. It's prospecting, and if you're, whether you're looking for a job, you're looking for a client, or you're looking for, a new supplier, you got to find out and you got to carve out regularly scheduled time to grow the network. I mean, we're doing it today. It's great. I think you have to become more comfortable being visible. We're attending a webinar today, but you really need to get out there and see see different people. Coffees are great. I mean, I've been doing virtual coffees now for the past, really since June is when we kind of finally started doing a whole lot of that stuff. But I think you have to spend, time doing it with LinkedIn. And I can't say, I mean, it's the best, it's really one of the best tools we have available for us right now whether you're looking for a job or you're in a company right now looking for a customer.
Awesome. Thank you. And Lauren, over to you. How are you seeing people leverage LinkedIn to network?
Many ways. And I want to say first to everyone that's on here, if you have not adopted that, just everyone in the B2B space should utilize LinkedIn. And if you don't know how, or it's fearful for you, or you don't want to, you don't have time, make it a priority to get support for that in some way. Professional support, quality support for your presence in this space is truly essential. And this is about making that initial contact and retaining it, because we don't get to communicate in that face-to-face way, or we can't schedule the meetings that we used to. So this takes the place of that. Just adopt that as a practice and recognize that's what's happening. And when you do this, this is your past clients, your existing clients, it's inside your current network. You know, as you build what you have as a network on LinkedIn, our event connections, like today already, I've received many LinkedIn connections from those of you that are on this participating as a participant, participating as a participant. There you go. My tongue is betraying me right now. I apologize for that. But that's going to eventually fuel the engagement that we have. And fueling the engagement is making meaning, and making meaning with our connections. This isn't just, I want to do business with this person. It's, I've met them, I know someone who knows them. Somebody else was talking about, you know, the power of executive connections and the group that is. Oh, I know someone that you know that was in executive connections, or I know somebody that you know that's in MML or in Vistage. Those are powerful connections, and those can make meaning as you continue to work within the ecosystem that we have in our MML area, just the space that we operate in. So the first connection message that you send to someone, once you've engaged with their content on the platform, you've read some of their articles, you've read their blogs, you've visited their website, you've seen their posts, you left comments, they've exchanged banter. The first connection message, do not get bogged down with the content that goes in that, and do not blow all of the content that you want to say in one single message. Here's who I am, here's what I have to offer, I want to work with you, do you want to work with me? It's not as important to focus on the content of that message as it is so much to focus on your post-connection messages. Thanks so much for seeing me today, or it was really great to meet you. Hey, it looks like we have a mutual friend. I would love to learn more about your business. And then from that point on, those post-connection messages will help you do multiple things. Some of them, refine your connections. Is this someone that you definitely want to be in contact with? Does this person add value to your network? Does this person put themselves into the position of being a lead, but a qualified lead? And then what LinkedIn serves as is we can use the language like, you know, since we can't do in-person meetings, you know, in your LinkedIn Messenger, since we can't do in-person meetings, can we connect by phone? Can we do a Zoom? Can we do a Google Meet? What would work for you? Tom, you're exactly right. Can we do a virtual coffee? Mine probably doesn't taste as good as yours, but let's do it anyway. You know, we can walk around with that mimosa or Bailey's, whatever it is that we want to do. You can do that in this situation. And I think that adds, we are so fortunate to be experiencing this in this time right now, because we can still have this Brady Bunch connection. What LinkedIn isn't very good at is allowing users to organize the people in their network for meaningful outreach. So I do have a recommendation. Other colleagues that I work with use Dux Soup, DUX-soup.com. That allows you to tag and organize your network, and there's a free version. So, and I'll talk a little bit about that for your sales teams in a moment, but for your sales teams and then for yourselves as executives or participants in your own version of sales in the manufacturing world, using tools to help organize your network for meaningful, qualified outreach is a valuable time saver instead of just being overwhelmed by what the possibilities are with a massive social network.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I know we're at 10:01 here, but since we started just a couple minutes short, I want to make sure the attendees get their full dollars worth here. So a couple of quick questions. This one is for Paul. Have you seen manufacturers experience the impact from COVID differently than, say, like a service industry, other than restaurants, travel, and leisure? Have you seen anything different with how the manufacturers are experiencing this?
The answer would be yes. And one example would be, I think, just service businesses. I'll use our firm as an example. You know, we can go virtual, remote, you know, all our employees almost overnight or within a day or two. Manufacturers, on the other hand, I don't think have that luxury, because their employees need to show up. And they need to be in the shop, or they need to be on the assembly line. And so I think from that perspective, what we've seen with our manufacturing clients is a lot of inquiries on the employment law side. And so early on, and we continue to see our clients asking a lot of questions about what can we force our employees to do and what can't we force our employees to do. And we've had clients take advantage of this time period to review and update their employee manuals. Because, while some of this may go away, years upon years after this pandemic is addressed, there's still some good, best practices that I think, are sort of being highlighted by the experience of having employees in the shop, having to have regulations, having to have certain rules, how to impose those, how to enforce them, et cetera. And so I think, it's brought some of those issues to a head. And our employment group, really early on was working almost 24/7, trying to make sure that they were addressing these issues and the best they could. And I think our clients have taken advantage of that and have tried to do a little bit of planning as this thing has gone on.
Great. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. And one more question from Zane. I'll put this out to the whole panel here. Has anyone witnessed a change in attitude towards the emphasis or need for marketing, whether those efforts are internal or external?
100%. And I would say that in March and April, and then for the resistors, May and June, it turned into a manic panic operation for someone who didn't already have a version of marketing as a part of their regular operations. Even in August, there were clients that picked up and said, hey, we know that we need this. We've never ever spent dollars. We've never allocated marketing dollars to the technology or the manufacturing industry in which we serve because we were so well known in our space. But now that we're not able to go to trade shows and events anymore, not that that's not marketing, but not that we're not allowed to send a person just as an attendee. We have no outward facing content that supports what it is that we do. We have no lead capturing sources other than the sales teams that can no longer go into service in a particular facility. What is it that we can do? So it did turn into on the spectrum, people who had it ramped it up, people who didn't have it panic responded. And then when they finally got into a flow of recognizing the value add, I would like to go back and say that that was another piece that lessons we've learned from the pandemic that will continue post-pandemic operations is quality marketing for adequate lead generation, and then the appropriate training for the sales teams to follow up with that partnership with marketing to effectively qualify leads and then transfer them into sales.
Awesome. Very good. Thank you very much. So I know we're at 10:04 here. Lauren, I just have one question. I'm sure this is on the mind of a lot of business owners. What are the expectations of your sales team with prospecting? So if you could give us a short 30-second answer and we'll wrap things up.
Okay. So using virtual communication tools, creating processes for follow-up, calendar blocking specifically for development. You guys are getting like the Cliff's Notes version of this. This is not how I want to deliver this. And that time management become uber important. The qualification process, and I said that for just a moment, is an essential and efficient component of this, that the lead generation with the combined efforts of marketing and sales be more precisely targeted to the prospects that are most likely to buy and have the highest lifetime value based on data. And if you don't have that type of research, that's the sort of thing that someone definitely needs to hone in on, because you don't want to spin your wheels or just be wasting any marketing and sales dollars. For sales teams specifically, activity focused on the right prospects, like I've said, not just a prospect. So data-driven decisions that help with your conversion rates that operate between like the stages of the sales process, focusing on contract values, leading to solutions that sell versus just upselling and just cross-selling to secondary revenue opportunities. And a final note, and having salespeople focused on selling the most profitable items, not just the most revenue. So if you want to stick around for longer, you need to know that you're generating profit in the spaces that you're working in. So it can look great from a sales and marketing perspective, but when your CFO gets in there and says, no, we didn't make as much money this year, you really need to make sure that the CFO and the sales and marketing teams are all speaking the same language and loving the same language, that, not only are we marketing, but we're marketing to the right people, and that's generating profit, which is what we know we need to do to retain the quality people to keep going through this. And sales compensation plans that are aligned with those values, sales compensation plans that are aligned with the variables that lead the sales teams to honor their capacity and their capabilities, that impacts smarter, more targeted sales activity.
Awesome. Awesome stuff. Well, thank you to all the panelists here for chiming in today and taking time out to share these pandemic lessons and things that we need to do better next time. Thanks to all of our members who attended today. We really appreciate you jumping on for the networking this morning. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And thank you for joining us for the webinar. We will be doing this again in January. So please look for a date. That date is TBD right now, but we'll be getting that date out real soon here. So I thank everyone for attending today. I hope you have a blessed and happy holiday season. Stay safe, folks, and we'll see you all really soon. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Nice job, everyone.
Thanks, folks.